Hello and welcome to another episode of The Detective Case
and Detective Close podcast.
We're your hosts. I'm Aaron Shirley.
And I'm Brian Townsend.
Kind of a theme we've been doing lately with our podcast, and that's interviewing law enforcement officers who now have become authors. So in keeping with that, welcome today's guest, Carlos Rodriguez. Thanks for coming out.
Oh yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks.
So first we want to kind of get into what you did in your law enforcement career, maybe why you got into it.
Yeah, so I was a Washington State trooper up in Washington State, not DC, and I did that I was with the department 27 years, but 25 commissioned. So I worked there in a civilian capacity in the beginning. But the reason why I became a trooper is at the time I was going out with my girlfriend then, who I ended up marrying, even though we're no longer together. But her oldest brother was killed by a DUI. Actually on Mother's Day, so here recently, so many years ago, and Washington State troopers, they're the ones who did DUI enforcement. So I worked in the mailroom for the Washington State Patrol, so I became a state trooper. So that's why I wanted to get into law enforcement. I had no desire to do law enforcement prior to that.
Did you go to college?
So I was actually, while I was in the mailroom, I was going to night school because the state of Washington, if you're a state employee, you can go to school and they'll reimburse you for your school. Once you showed that you had a C or higher, they would reimburse you. So I was doing that. I never finished my degree. I got actually 15 credits shy of my associates, 3 sciences. I don't know why I waited to do the 3 sciences at the end. And I went back when I was an auto theft detective for a while and tried to do all 3 at the same time, which was a mistake. And then I just kept working with my career and never completed that.
It's a hard thing is when you try to go back, right? Like, especially when you're so engrossed in our career, it's not like we work like a 9-to-5 job, right?
Right. And I mean, if I would have done one course at a time, but at the time, I was in auto theft. We had a lot of cases, and then I promoted to sergeant. And then I started to move around with that, and I just didn't go back and do it.
So what was like your bread and butter in law enforcement? What was like your thing?
So when I was brand new, it was DUIs, DUI enforcement. And then they always use the term, look beyond the stop. So I would look for different things. I would do this thing I called 2-minute drills. So when I was in the car, I used to chew Dentine Ice, the cinnamon flavored Dentine. I'd pop 2 of those in. I'd get in the car. I was like, okay, 2 minutes. Let's see if I can find a violation within 2 minutes. Once I found the violation, then I just slow down because you need to do that when you're on the stop to pay attention to things. And then once back in the car, okay, 2 minutes. Let's see if I can get something else in 2 minutes. And that's just how I kept things going, just to stay self-motivated. And then, so I really liked doing that. I was real proactive. And then I looked really young when I was brand new troop. So that led me into getting to do, there was something called the Aggressive Driving Apprehension Team. And there were a lot of street racers at the time. It was when Fast and the Furious first came out. So I got to go in it was a Volvo. I had the sedan. We had a station wagon and a sedan. And you just go around and you'd look for the aggressive drivers. All the drivers out there, man, I wish there was a cop to see that. That's who we'd go after. But during that time, since I looked young, I got to go to the street races. And then that turned into me wanting to get into or the auto theft program. So when I was in auto theft, I was in a little Honda hatchback and used to deal with stolen property and working organizations, chop shops, things like that. So I really enjoyed that.
Was that like an undercover role then?
Yeah. So I used to, I think I wore Pumas, Nikes, Adidas, just basic, look like a kid. I was a skater growing up. So I had a bunch of old skater tees, wear the flat billed caps, a little bit off to the side. My partners hated it because they're like, fix your hat. And they like turn my hat the right way. But that's just kind of how I dressed anyways. Just growing up, I always dressed that way.
So you were actually living the movie then, right? That was you, Fast and
Yeah, I wasn't living life quarter mile at a time, but and I was definitely no Paul Walker, but yeah, I enjoyed that. It was fun, and I did that it was really only 18 months, and then I took the sergeant's test, just taking it just to see what it was like, because the patrol at that time, you take it if you didn't make it past a certain part score, then they wouldn't publish your name. And I tied for very last place. They took 70 and 5 people tied for last place. So 75 went forward. And then they put what you got when you get to the next stage. So then I prepped for that. Went to a course where they it's a mock course where they take you through different things and different scenarios. So I did that, and then I did really well because that was person to person. You're actually interacting with people. So I did that and then bumped up, and then I ended up promoting, and which I'm glad I did because a sergeant in the state patrol, you get to do so many different things, but it gave me the opportunity where I could still work cases as a working sergeant. So when I was on the road, I could still arrest DUIs. I could still do all those things. It was just more work because you still had to do all your supervisory things. You need to make sure you did that and take care of your people. But I liked it because it let me relate with my people. And then they knew that if I was doing something, that there was a reason why. I wasn't just, I just promoted and didn't have a reason. I actually could connect with them. So I like that. And then when I went to narcotics, and when I did that, I still worked cases. So I really learned from the people there when I went to narcotics because it was a multi-agency task force. I got to do a lot of cool things as a sergeant, so I really liked it because you got to be a part of both worlds.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite unit or?
I would say, okay, so I loved working at WestNet, which was narcotics, because I got to do some cool stuff, and I really learned how to be a cop there because I'm working with city, county, federal agents, so not just state patrol. So I really love that. I love the dynamic of it and all the challenges I had there, good and bad. I just learned so much from that doing that. And I was running a small police agency, so I loved that. But I really have to say it was when I worked crimes against children, and that's because it was the mission, and then the team that we built. Even though it was a small team, we just did so many things, and we were just working the whole time. Even though it felt overwhelming at times, we just always found a solution. We always found a way to make it work. We met so many wonderful people. I met so many people when I was in my time working crimes against children, and just seeing how everyone, for the most part, everyone coming together, putting egos aside to accomplish something to help protect vulnerable people. That's what I really liked about it. I mean, sometimes politics gets involved. Sometimes there's some egos in there, but making sure that you put those things in check so you can focus on the mission. I really enjoyed that. And I'm still involved in that space. So I have to say that was my favorite, the most difficult, but the most rewarding part of my career.
That's kind of like the main topic of what we're talking about today is crimes against children and this whole space of trafficking. And then the book that you wrote, The Ugly Underneath, a firsthand account of protecting children and the cost of doing so. So let's kind of talk about that.
Yeah. So the book, I took a creative writing class when I was going to night school, and I thought, I liked writing, and I thought if I ever wrote something, it would be probably a comedy or something fictional because I liked the Coen brother films. I don't know if you guys if you remember those, like Miller's Crossing and the real old school ones. Oh brother, where art thou? So I thought maybe I'd write something like that. I never thought I'd write something about things that I had done or participated with. And what had happened is I moved down to San Diego. That's where I live now. And I didn't have the same support structure that I had in Washington State. So I went and started to see someone for therapy to kind of set some things right, issues I was dealing with. And through that process, it was suggested that I should, would I be okay with maybe sharing some of my experiences with the world, because other people who did the work or maybe didn't quite understand what the work was could benefit from it. And I thought, well, I'll write a book. So then I figured out, how do you write a book? Went online, Googled what you're supposed to do, talked to some friends who have written books, and I picked up, I listened to Audible. So I listened to Stephen King's On Writing, and I listened to that. And then I followed some of the things that he said there. I would write about 2 hours a day to get my initial manuscript. And so that's how it started. And the book's really about some things in my life that occurred that prepared me to work crimes against children without me even realizing it. So before I was even a cop. And then actually when I was in it, how it affected me. Like the first time I'd had to work a really serious case, the one that really impacted me. So I share about that, how I reacted, listening to some of the disclosures and how that impacted me, and things that some things I did right, some things I definitely did wrong, so other people can benefit from uh, my mistakes and do the job better than I did. And then there's some resources on the end, so it's I think it's really good for people in the work, people who have family doing the work, and then anyone who's interested in what it's really like to work those crimes.
It's something to talk about a lot on this podcast too, and that's like officer wellness and like mental
Yeah,
health and well being, because we always society doesn't realize what we do, right? And we talk
yeah,
about some of the violence and the craziness that we see, and people never call us because they're having a good day, right?
right,
Um, and it's like, that's one topic, right? We deal with crazy stuff, dangerous stuff, but then when you're dealing with crimes against children and the human trafficking angle, it's like you're taking it to a whole nother level that I think even some police officers don't realize, like the true evil that's out there, especially when
yeah.
people are doing things to children.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes like when I testify, you'd get asked questions, and depending where it went, they talk about different victims, and there's different. Obviously, you have when you have a kid like that's or whoever the subject of that's being victimized, that's the number one victim who's being affected, I think, the most. But then you have these different layers. You have their family, maybe their family, if someone's being trafficked or someone's being abused, and you have someone in the family that didn't know about it. I mean, that's someone who's a victim. You have a spouse, if their husband did a crime and then they get caught, what's the after effect there? Then you have law enforcement who are working these cases, and they have to see these horrific images or listen to these horrific things. The prosecutors that prosecutes the case that have to look at I mean, there's just so many different levels, different ways that people are victimized by this crime. And and I think another thing that kept me going is you look at the stuff and how difficult it is and the things you see, but that's nothing compared to what the person that's being victimized has gone through. And that kind of helped me, you know, set my mind straight. It's like, look, yeah, I'm feeling this way. This is horrible, but it's nothing compared to what this person had to go through. And if I can continue to go through this person who's doing these horrible things, hopefully will never be able to do it again. And I think that's something. So if someone is doing this work, that can help. Hopefully that helps motivate you. You're doing it for a reason. It is difficult, but you can get through it. And then surrounding yourselves with people that understand, so that you're not alone in that fight. Because I think a lot of people, I know I did it. You just keep going, and you don't always share everything or how you're feeling, and it just kind of bottles up, and then that begins to impact you negatively.
Can you share some specifics about the book? You said some things you got right, some things you learned. Can you share a couple of those things for?
Yeah. Um, I think uh, the first thing that comes to mind, I would say, is the way I segregated my personal life from my work life. I kept those things separate because my personal life, that was my escape. But and I think that part is good. But I think what I did wrong there was when I thought I was protecting my wife and my kids, I didn't. I would do things to keep it separate. I wouldn't talk about certain things, but I think I went a little too far because they didn't quite understand everything I was going through. And I think it would have helped more because sometimes I would distance myself. So I'd go home and we had a finished basement, and that was my man cave. So I'd go, hey, I need to go work on something or go do something downstairs. And I was just trying to get away to decompress. And talking to my kids later, they said that at times they felt that I just didn't want to be around them because, so they thought it was something they did. And so I think that's something to be really careful of, is just in how you approach, have the conversations with your families, hey, I had a difficult day. Here's what I was dealing with. You don't have to go into the details, but, I'm going to need some time to just process this, so I may be down there, and then, come check on me in a little time. I didn't have those conversations. It was always, hey, I need to take a call, or, hey, I got to go do something for a minute, or I'm going to go do this. It was always because I didn't want them to know what I was going through, which is okay to let some people know, to let the ones that love you know what you're going through. So I think I got that wrong. I think, as a supervisor, what I think I got wrong is I felt I did a really good job taking care of my people, but I didn't always apply those things that had them do to myself. So if you're supervising your team and you say, hey, make sure that before you go home, 2 hour, what I would do is 2 hours before you go home, if you had to look at difficult material, I'd say you need 2 hours doing something else before you go home. So your mind's in a better frame for when you get home to your family. Because an example, I don't know if you guys do this, but when you'd go home and your family would see you because they're happy to see you, and you say, "Hey, I need 15 minutes. Just give me 15 minutes, and I can be with you." But you never really get the 15 minutes, right? Because they're excited. They want to tell you about their day. They want to know about your day. So what I would do is I'd built in say, "Hey, you need at least 2 hours to decompress from what that stuff is, and then you get yourself right, and then when you're ready." You don't need to ask for those 15 minutes because you're ready to be present for your family. And then there's that disconnect. It's just something totally different in your head. So I would do that for a period of time, but then our office changed and the routine where I would go, because I lived an hour originally from where I worked. So I'd go and I'd park at a Starbucks. I like Starbucks iced tea. And so I would get a Starbucks iced tea. I'd go park behind this, I think it was a Sizzlers, and I would play on my phone or I'd answer emails. I'd do something totally different for about 45 minutes, and then I'd drive home. And that was my routine, so I'd be good. Well, when we switched offices we went to the Tacoma FBI office, we became co-located with their task force, their CTF. When I went there, that changed my routine. I didn't have the routine, and I remember I was just I would be angry. I'd be a lot angry. I just didn't follow my own rules. So I think it's really important, to take care of your people, but you have to take care of yourself, because if you don't, then it's going to negatively impact what you're doing.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. So you write about this, share those experiences. How has that helped? What kind of feedback are you getting from peers or folks that are, familiar with your work now?
Yeah. So the feedback has actually been really good. It's been great. And which is refreshing, because when I first put the book out there, super nervous. I mean, I knew I felt it was good, but you don't know even when people are saying it's good beforehand, because, I know that person, or, that's my publisher, they have to tell me that, so that's what I think. But then once it went out there and reviews started to come in, or you get a phone call, I'd get phone calls from people I hadn't talked to forever. And they say, "Hey, I read the book. Can you jump on a call?" I had a guy who I worked just one or two cases with another department, and it was a uh, crimes against children case. It was horrible. It was CSAM. We removed a little baby out of this house. I won't go into the details, but it was bad, and helped him with that case. And so he found me on LinkedIn. He got the book, found me on LinkedIn, and said, "Hey, can you call me? Here's my number." So I called him, and then we talked for, had to at least be an hour, minimum an hour. We're just talking about how the cases had affected him, how the book was so important for him, and other people need to hear about it, and how he's going to go tell these other people. And it just made me feel really good. I was like, okay, I was right doing this just for this one instance right here. This was worth putting this out there. And he lives in Vegas. I'm actually going to CrimeCon at the end of the month, and he lives there. So I'm going to go have dinner with him and his wife, which is going to be pretty cool. So it's stuff like that. Or people, I had a guy call me who, his name's Jeff, and I play competitive paintball. So I know him through the paintball world. And every now and then we talk, just here and there. He's got two little girls, and he read the book and he called me, and I hadn't talked to him. And it had at least been 1 to 2 years. And he just says, "I read your book, and, you know, I know you." He goes, "But I didn't really know you. I didn't know everything you were going through." And he goes, "I just want to thank you for what you did. And, that this, I learned a lot from this, and about you." And I've got that from some of my other friends who weren't in law enforcement. It's the same thing. It's like, "Yeah, I didn't know you dealt with these things, or you went through these things." And I mean, of course, that was by design. This isn't feel good stuff. You don't want to go and talk about it. And then my personal friends, I didn't really talk about it, because the last thing I wanted to do was go home and talk about this stuff. I wanted to escape from it. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to be in it all the time, even though it felt like I was in it all the time.
It's amazing how, you make yourself vulnerable and you share your experiences and how it helps others, helps yourself, obviously, and it helps others as
Yeah.
well. We've heard that from others. I think our first guest was in a critical incident, and he talked about how he was listening to others because he thought he was in this unique space. And he actually reached out to some others, and they end up talking kind of like what you were saying, for hours, right?
Yeah.
And they share this experiences, even though the maybe the incidents are a little different, or but the theme is the same, right? And to know you're not alone, and to know that there's others out there who've navigated in the same world, and this is what helped them, and this is how they cope. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and it's a thing that obviously you've been able to succeed with this book. So congratulations to that for that.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm,
It's
oh, go ahead.
it's it's interesting, right? Because we have this stigma, right, in law enforcement, right? We can never drop the stigma, but there's something to writing and getting your feelings and thoughts out, and even like just journaling, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's just this is a fact. Whether law enforcement wants to accept it or not, but it's maybe something we need to adopt more in law enforcement, because other career fields are doing it. I knew this heart surgeon in Chicago, and he was doing it for his patients and
Hmm.
for the family of the patients because of the trauma that they were dealing with, just like for medical reasons, right? You have children in the hospital who are kind of on the edge, and you don't know if they're going to make it or not, and a lot of times they are through medical intervention. And it's like, how do you cope and deal with that stress? So he would actually help his patients and the families through journaling exercises.
Yeah. When I first started writing, like I said before, it was going to be turned into the book. I just picked boxes. And that's what originally it was called, boxes, just to start, because my whole life, and I think a lot of cops do this, and probably other people, is you take things, you compartmentalize things so you have the capacity to deal with it, especially uncomfortable things. And that's what I did. I would take a box and I'd fill it up and put it on in a metal shelf. So when I started writing, when I was unpacking things I was dealing with, that's what I did. I would just take a box off, and I'd write about something. And then it turned into, then I had all these boxes, and so it was easier to, then it just had to organize them into something that someone would want to read, is what I had to do later. But and there's a lot of boxes that are not in the book. Yeah, for
Maybe
sure.
there's like a second book coming then, right?
Oh, I don't know. Some of those boxes I don't think will go out to the public, but I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Any successes or wins maybe that you want to share, right? Maybe through some of these case investigations, right? Because we always focus on the bad and the negative and the horrible. Like, sometimes we have some really good resolutions to some of these cases, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I'd say one. Well, obviously, when you remove someone from society that's doing horrible things, that's a success, automatically there. I would think, is I think it's sometimes it's the little wins. Like, one, it didn't even develop into a case. Someone I was connected with someone who we had just run this large scale demand op where we were focusing on people who wanted to have sex with kids 13 and younger. And we would run these across Washington State. We do 4 or 5 a year, and we'd average about 7 arrests a night, for people 13 and younger that wanted these kids. And so when we did that, we had finished one. I think we had like 20 plus arrests. It was in Thurston County, which is near the state capital in Washington State. And I'm talking to this guy, and the reason why he called is one of the people we had arrested, he said this guy had offended upon him, but it was years prior. So he's giving me this information. A lot of it, from what he's telling me, I don't know if I'm going to be able to corroborate any of it, because of how long ago it had happened. And so, but I'm listening to him, and then I tell him, I just say, look, hey, I'm really glad that we talked. I'm just going to tell you, just from what I've heard right now, unless we can get some of these other things, which I detailed what they were, I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to look into this, but I don't know if a prosecutor will be able to take this for a criminal prosecution because of these things, because it may be difficult to corroborate some of these things. I said, but no matter, and I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I just want you to be prepared for that if it doesn't go how you think it may go in your mind. But even if that happens, I just want you to know that, I'm glad you told me that I believe that this happened, and I want you to know that. And he starts crying. And he said, just the fact that you sat here and listened to me and said that to me means so much to me. And that right there was a win. But then I never heard from the guy again. Just never. He never called me back. And I think part of it, because when we were on the phone, is he was having difficult with making the decision if he wanted to come forward or not. And I think he was trying to feel it out, because based on what he had, if it would be successful or not. So I don't know if he wanted to go all the way. But he was receiving services, and that's how he got in touch with me. Is I had someone who worked in the prosecutor's office that was their lane, is providing resources to people, and that's how he had connected with me, was through her. So at least he was getting what he needed, and he had my information. I think as far as cases, there are so many. I think one of the ones that comes to mind is we were working one of those undercover cases, and there was this guy who ended up being a fireman. And the things he said, he was trying to have sex with some young girls. I don't remember the exact ages, but definitely I think it was 11 and under, with two girls he wanted to have sex with. And just the things that he said were just so horrific. I remember our undercover who played the part of the mom, when they were on the phone, she said that was the worst thing that she had ever heard, just how disgusting those conversations were. And then the guy we'd started talking to him in one operation, and the conversations continued on into a nut when we did our next one. And then that's when he finally came in and we arrested him. And that case, when we had so many different motions with that case, and then it finally went to trial years later. And just that whole process of how difficult that was with him, and just the different motions and things the shenanigans they were doing. But when he was found guilty and there was a guilty verdict, that was one of the best feelings ever, to see him. And then he just started crying. And I don't want to sound mean or anything, but that just felt really good, that I was watching there, that this person who wanted to do these horrible things to these kids, and then not knowing, did he do anything else with anyone else? Because we didn't have any information or any evidence of that. But that was, I think, that felt really good, to know that guy's in prison and can't do anything to any kids. So it's instances like that. There have been tons like that, where you have these people. You have, like, I can think of another one, a person who we had evidence, 10 victims came forward saying this guy did these things, and then finally able to know that because of the case that we built, that he's going to be in prison and not get out. I think this guy with the 10 victims that came forward, through our investigation, that he won't get out till he's about 75, if he makes it that far. So he's down in Oregon. So that was so I think things like that feel really good, that you can take them out of society. And then just with trafficking, when you have someone call you that you're not expecting to call you, and they tell you that they're okay and that they're fine, I think and I don't get those calls anymore because I don't have my work phone anymore. So I don't work the cases, but every now and then there's one girl who would call me, and when she'd call, she'd say because I never recognized who she was, because it was always a different number. And then when she was clean, she always sounded different, because she was healthy. And I always knew her when she wasn't healthy. So when she would call, that was always a great day. And she'd just say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I'm at the beach right now, or I'm at Ocean Shores with my aunt, and I'm doing really good. So those were always great, when someone would get out of that lifestyle.
Something that you said that was always horrible for me is when law enforcement happens upon a criminal, this isn't their first time, right?
Yeah.
Like what's the probability that this is the first time that all these people just happen to pick today to, like, commit a crime, right?
Yeah.
But backing up on something you said, so you said when you do these operations, you might, like, net 7 people. You might, like, make 7 arrests in an evening.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you, we could have done more, but when you're running an op, so when we run these ops, so my task force was small. I was myself, sometimes one detective, usually two detectives. That's all I had in my group, and we had no admin support, dedicated admin support. And we had some in our division, but they were doing all kinds of other things. So it was small. So what we would do is we just made a bunch of friends, and when we'd run these ops, we'd have 60 or 70 people, and we'd assign them to different roles. So you had folks who just did search warrants, you had people who did digital forensics, arrest team, surveillance teams, undercover chatters, and we could just run these. We'd go into an area around the state, and we'd set up for about a week, depending on which area we were in, and we'd run them for just nonstop during that time. And when we first did it, it was literally nonstop. We had a smaller team, but it just we realized we couldn't sustain that, because the things that start to affect your fatigue, then maybe that's going to raise your use of force, or you forget something in a report. You don't ask a question that you should have asked. So we started to get more people to help us. And then we scheduled when we were going to run the ops so that we would minimize those things. So we would try to reduce the fatigue. And then if we had a target who still wanted to show up at a certain time, we would just take a group of people to have a smaller team for that. And then we just stay on schedule. But we would usually, it was an average of 7 in a day is what it would be. So I think the most we got was mid-20s at one of the ops.
Wow. And that's a scary thing. I think that's what we try to shield society from, that they don't realize that your team in one small area working a small region of the United States netted anywhere from 7 to 20 people, adults that are intentionally trying to have relations with underage kids.
Yeah, we're talking 13 and younger. The youngest someone showed up for was 3 months, 3-month-old. No, 3-year-old. Sorry, 3-year-old. 3-month-old was a different case. 3-year-old. That was the youngest. And in that case, it was. Have you guys ever been talking to someone and typing or chatting, and then the conversation you're having with someone else you type out? I don't know if you've ever done that, but well, I have. So I was chatting with someone, a suspect, and I'm hearing a conversation off on the side, and I type "and younger" because they were talking about younger ages. And then one of my teammates said, "Hey, Los," that's my nickname is Los, Los. They're like, "Los, did you see what you sent that guy?" So I looked and it said "and younger," and I was like, "Oh no, I didn't mean to send that." So then the guy comes back and says, "How young?" So I'm like, "Oh, okay," because that wasn't my persona. So I put 3 years, and then the guy was fish on. That was his age range, was that. So, and he was a registered sex offender. We found out where he worked, so we sent a team to the restaurant that he worked at and just watched the guy all day up until when he came up to meet with us, to just watch the different things. We wanted to see if he was interacting with any other kids, just different things like that. Did he have weapons? Where was he going? Where did he live? So he came and then we arrested him and then interviewed that guy. And I remember that guy in the interview, I asked him, I said, "Hey, when you saw," and this is after we developed rapport, but I asked him, when you saw that it was the police with everyone with their vests on, I go, "How did you feel?" And he said, "Oh, I felt sad." And I said, "Well, why did you feel sad?" And he's like, "Oh, because, I got caught." And I said, "No, really, why did you feel sad?" I go, "I saw that you hesitated when you say that, we've been talking a while. Really, why did you feel sad?" And he said, "Well, when I saw that it was the police," he goes, "I knew I wasn't going to get what I came here for." And to me, I was inside, I'm like cheering up and down, because I know that's a great statement. That's what I need. Because in Washington State, when people would show up for someone 13 and younger, they were looking at 11 to or 12 to 13. It was 5 years to life, because it's an indeterminate sentence in Washington State for attempt rape of a child or rape of a child, and then which these were all attempt cases in the demand ops. And then if it's 11 and younger, it was 10 years. So 5 years to life for 12 and 13, 11 and younger, 10 years to life. So in my mind, when I'm interviewing these people, we already have them dead to rights for why they were there. So in the interview, I'm thinking, do they have live victims? What other evidence can I get? Am I going to get the passwords into their phone? Do they have any, who have they offended upon in the past? And then what questions can I ask when it's their time to go up to the board to see if they're going to consider to let these guys out, where if they're going to review all this, what are the questions I can ask that can maybe help them. If they need to stay in there, they're going to stay in there and not get out. So that was one of the questions that I asked. And with him saying that, I was like, oh, okay, that's going to be good. I think that's going to be really good. And hopefully this guy never gets out.
What do you think the percentages of all these cases, the ones that we're talking about specifically, how many people just own it and plead guilty, and how many of them fight it tooth and nail?
When we did the CSAM, child sexual abuse material cases, those we hardly ever went to trial. I mean, they all pled guilty. When we started to work these demand ops where people are looking at, hey, I may be in prison the rest of my life, we had a higher instance of going to trial. I'd say now the majority still took a deal, a plea deal. And the average I think they would get is 60 to 70 months was the sentence, is what they'd get. Some of them still with the indeterminate sentence. Sometimes they take that off as a deal to get them to take it. The prosecutors would. The ones that went to trial, I know myself, I've testified in at least 50 of those. And we had a 94% guilty verdict on those ones. So it was pretty good. Every now and then something would happen. Like we had one where the jury just, they didn't like that he didn't bring gifts for the kids. You know, we didn't have real kids, of course, but he didn't bring gifts for the kids. So they thought he was just there for the mom, because that's what he was trying to say. He was there for the mom, even though there's no dialogue. It's very clear. There's no conversation that he's there for the mom. The questions he'd ask were very graphic about the kids, but you know, you can't control that. You know, that's, but I think 94% is really good for that going to trial.
Yeah, you never, law enforcement always takes the blame, but I have been in some circus of a trial where the jury or the judge will say something. It's like, how in the world? Like, this is unbelievable. And then when they get off or they're not found guilty, it's like, oh, law enforcement messed up again. And it's like, no, like you have no idea what goes on in these courtrooms.
Yeah, that. And then sometimes, I mean, I got to see it because I traveled across the state and got to do cases and testify in multiple counties. And not all prosecutors are the same either, right? So some just don't, they're overwhelmed or overworked, or maybe that isn't the job for them. I had one where it just wasn't the job for that person. But the majority, I mean, I got to work with some really aggressive prosecutors as well, where they didn't really care about the track record. They cared about the case. And so they're willing to say, hey, we're going to go forward with this. I feel confident we'll succeed. Even if they, where others may like, oh no, I think we're going to offer this because not sure about this. So I was really lucky. I had some great prosecutors, and it's a team. I mean, that's why I would tell my team when we were working these cases, your job isn't done until the case is adjudicated, because there's going to be things that the prosecutor may need or someone else may need that you have to do this, or it could be follow-up. So make sure you're prepared to do that, and then put together the best case file that you can. So when you hand it off to the next level, the prosecutor, they have everything that they need. And if they don't, then you got to jump through the hoop to get it for them. And that's how we put our cases together.
Wow. That's good advice for any type of investigation, right? For sure. Are you continuing? I know you're retired now, but are you still in this line of work or
yeah,
what's going on now? Yeah.
Yeah, so right now I currently work for San Diego Unified School District. I'm an internal investigator there. So I work Title IX cases mainly. So sexual harassment, I've done dating violence, stalking, molestation, rape, inappropriate touching, policy violations. So I do that with employee on employee cases, employee on student, student on employee. And then we have our own police department at the district, because San Diego Unified is the second largest school district in all of California, only second to LA. So we have our own police department. Every now and then, because I'm retired law enforcement, if there's a case there that the department needs me to investigate, like an IA type case, I've done a few of those, not too many. And then we just launched our human trafficking prevention program, which is awesome. My boss, he was a prosecutor and he worked HT cases, human trafficking cases. We put away a lot of traffickers. So he has the know-how of how to do things in that area. I investigated the cases. We have this awesome lady that we work with. Her name is Rakina, and she's knows everybody here in San Diego that works in the services side and providing support for our students. And then we have our Title IX coordinators. She worked for the AG's office in Mississippi with human trafficking. So we have a really good team here, but we didn't really have a mechanism on how the concern specific to HT, how people should respond. So we created a program where there's a form that people can fill out. We made a website. Anyone can go to this website, and it just kind of, if there's a concern, it needs to go to law enforcement. That happens right away. If it isn't, and it just walks the person right through everything. If they need services, what's going on, reminder what the flags are, and then it gets it to someone who has the experience and the capacity to do something about it. So they don't really have to worry about it. They just like, hey, I have a concern. Let me get it to someone. And a lot of times it isn't trafficking, but it's definitely a need or a resource that our students may need. Let's say it's kids who need a place to sleep, or the parents don't have a job because they were fired and then now they're on the streets. So we can connect them with different partners that we have that provide those services. So maybe it keeps them from entering that vulnerable population where then they may be trafficked. So we're trying to really do a preventative way. We built a multidisciplinary team in this process. So we're connected. We're partners with the Human Trafficking Task Force here. We have now a liaison with our police department, and then we have a San Diego Youth Services. They provide training for our students, like on healthy relationships. They provide resources if they need food and if they need job training. They do a multiple. I'm not doing them. I'm not doing a good job of describing all the great things that they do. And then we have other organizations that do all of these things that just isn't in our lane, but they have the ability and the resources to help. So we just built that, and it's been going really well. And then we're training. So now we're training all of our sites. We're training the bus drivers. We just trained the bus drivers last month because they have a different lens. They overhear things. We have some interns that helped us with the program. So it's from a student perspective and not an old guy's perspective, so that the students will listen. They just created these cool stickers. I'm going to a board meeting tonight where we're presenting what they did to the school board and the stickers that they made. And they designed the stickers in a way where it doesn't say, like if you've been trafficked or stop trafficking. It's more, you matter, or it's basically if you have a concern or there's something you need to report, you can get the QR code. Because, if kids see someone scanning, you're being trafficked or report trafficking, they're like, oh, this person is being pimped out. Your kids are mean. So we're trying to do it in a way where someone would want to take a picture of it and not feel like they're going to be made fun of or ostracized from their friend groups. So real excited about that. And that'll go on the buses. And that's been really helpful. They helped us with all our PowerPoint presentations too. So they've made them so people actually want to look at them, and students want to listen. So because we're all adults, so we don't get it quite as the same way as they do. But yeah, so I love that I still in a job where I still get to help kids and protect kids, because at the school you're the first line of defense. I mean, the schools have your kids for 8 hours at least a day, and then if there's any after school things. So making sure that people there have the resources and what they need to keep our kids safe, I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Helping people, providing resources, and you're getting them into the fight. You got more eyes and ears on the
Yes.
ground, and that's and that helps everyone out. So yeah, kudos to you and to all the folks you mentioned. So for sure.
How do we find your book or your website that we can link in here?
Yeah. So my website is theuglyunderneath.com. And then the book, you can find it anywhere. It's on Amazon. It's Barnes and Noble. It's anywhere online right now. Or if you're going to go to CrimeCon, I'll be there. Dallas Crimes Against Children, I'll be there. So if you want to stop by and say hi, be more than happy. I'd love to meet and talk with you. Then I'll have the book there. IATI, I'll be at IATI, which it's a conference in Florida. I'll be at the Pacific Northwest ICAC conference. I'll be there for that. So a lot of different places, but if it's online, that's the best way, or you can Google it. And then my socials are C_Rodriguez198. So for Instagram or TikTok. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to get it. So
All right. Any final thoughts?
No, it's awesome. Okay. Thank you for writing this book and sharing your story and helping others. I mean, I know it helps yourself, which is wonderful, and you're also helping others, and it's pretty obvious. So, I can't say it enough. Thank you.
yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, to our viewers, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.